17 U.S.C. 107 federal law allows citizens to use copyrighted media for fair use. That is criticism, news reporting, teaching, and parody.
Kuma, Yahweh, Weaputu Oyeveka, Weanusa Misameka, arise of you, O Yahweh. Kuma, let your enemies be scattered, and let those that hate thee flee from before thee. Let all of Yasharah, Yisrael, who love, worship, and praise Yahweh, give him thanks by saying hallelujah.
Shalom everyone, and welcome to Into All Truth. My name is Rachel. We welcome donations, and we thank you everyone for donations that you made for calendars and cookbooks. Make a donation of $35 or more at livelightwell.com, and you'll get both the calendar and the Hebraic lifestyle Chaya Eat Life and Fast book. And I pray that as you listen to this study, that the Ruach HaKodesh will lead you into all truth and show you things to come. Baruch atah kulam, in the name of Yahusha HaMashiach.
Stolen identity, a lock without a key. We've been the butt of the joke throughout history. Yasharel, know thyself 12 tribes. Yah's heard our cry, true Hebrew Israelites. Identity, a lock without a key.
So today we are covering the four carpenters. The primary first carpenter is the Medo-Persians, and the four carpenters are the ones who will repatriate Israel to the land, and they're the same ones who scattered Israel to the four corners of the earth. So today we are featuring the Medo-Persians, and those are the people in the zone of the Assyrians as well. And so we're just going to get into a general study on the four carpenters, and then we will get specifically into the Medo-Persian Empire. The reason why I wanted to do this video is because I've explored these scriptures on the invasion of the Promised Land and how it goes about. And there's a prophecy of how it takes place. In addition to that, there's also the prophecy of four carpenters repatriating Israel to their land. All right, so the four carpenters are described as four artificers, okay? Four artificers. And so it's going to be by prophecy and scripture that we determine who these people are. So the four carpenters. Zechariah 2. And I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, four horns. And I said to the angel that spoke with me, what are these, my Lord? And he said to me, these are the horns that have scattered Judah and Israel and Jerusalem. And the Lord showed me four artificers. And I said, what are these coming to do? And he said, these are the horns that scattered Judah, and they broke Israel into pieces, and none of them lifted up his head. And these are come forth to sharpen them for their hands, even the four horns, the nations that lifted up the horn against the land of Yahuwah to scatter it. And I lifted up my eyes, and I looked, and behold, a man in his hand with a measuring line. And I said to him, whither goest thou? And he said to me, to measure Jerusalem, to see what is the breadth of it, and what is the length of it. And behold, the angel that spoke with me stood by, And another angel went forth to meet him and spoke to him, saying, Run and speak to that man, saying, Jerusalem shall be fully inhabited by the reason of the abundance of men and cattle in the midst of her. And I will be to her, saith Yahuwah, a wall of fire round about, and I will be for a glory in the midst of her. Hallelujah. So you guys, that is the promise of the end of the scattering, the final regathering. But we should take a look at this because these are the translations, two different translations. And I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, 4 horns. And I said to the angel that spoke with me, What are these things, my Lord? And he said to me, These are the horns that have scattered Judah and Israel and Jerusalem. And Elohim showed me 4 artificers. And I said, What are these coming to do? And he said, These are the horns that scattered Judah, and they broke Israel in pieces. And none of them lifted up his head. And these are come forth to sharpen them for their hands, even the 4 horns, the nations that lifted up the horn against the land of Yahuwah to scatter it. Okay, so that is the Septuagint version. And down here is the KJV version. Then I said, What come these to do? And he spake, saying, These are the horns which have scattered Judah, so that no man did lift up his head. But these are come to fray them, to cast out the horns of the Gentiles, which have lifted up their horn over the land of Judah to scatter it. So this is King James, and it's a Masoretic text translated by the Ashkenazis. So it's very clear here when we read that it says, These are the horns that scattered Judah, and they broke Israel into pieces, and none of them lifted up their head or had any sympathy. And these are come forth to sharpen them for their hands, even the 4 horns, the nations that lifted up the horn against the land of Yahuwah to scatter it. So the same people who scattered and lifted up their horns against Israel are the same ones coming to try to sharpen Israel for their purpose. Now it says in this one, they've come to cast out the Gentiles, which lifted up their horn over the land of Judah to scatter it. But in this one, it's saying that these are the very same ones who scattered it. And I think the Septuagint is right, and we're going to see that that's true. Now, I want to focus on the term artificer. An artificer is a skilled worker, a craftsperson, one that contrives, devises, or constructs something, a deceptive or devious person. So we often hear that these are the 4 carpenters. Proper word is artificers. Artificers. And so this is who they are. Africa, Iran, Russia, and China. All right? And so Iran is like the real Medo-Persians, or part of that land was also Assyria. That's a whole section we've gone into in the other videos on the land of Ham and everything. And so we're going to get into the blurry lines around who the Medo-Persians really were, because they're a combination of Japheth and Shem, and the Assyrians were right next door. There's also Africa. Now this is Egypt, Islam, the Sudan, Ethiopia, the Danites, the Midianites. Remember, I told you in the other videos on Prester John that when Joseph went into captivity, the Midianites took him up. They sold him to the Ishmaelites, who sold them to the Egyptians, and then the Edomites kept them captive, and then the Midianites helped them with their release, and so on and so forth. So these are the descendants of Abraham, all right, who war with Israel, just like these are the descendants of Shem, mixed in with Japheth a little bit, who war with Israel. And these nations are also mixed with other nations. Okay, and so there's China, who I'm going to call the Khans, and the Huns and Canaan, because the Huns, the Hun, are obviously Mongoloid. They're a mix of Canaan and Japheth. And then obviously Canaan is a descendant of Ham. And then we have Russia, who are the Khazars, Tartaria, Gog, and Magog. Okay? And so these are the nations that we're going to find both scattered Israel And these are also the nations that are coming to what? What does it say? That come forth to sharpen them for their hands. So if you'll notice or remember in my videos on the Muslims, I keep reiterating over and over again that they are going to try to usurp the identity of Israel and move with Israel through the regathering. But of course, Yah is going to ultimately have his way. And they're trying to get ahead of it all. Okay? And that's the strategy, because this is why you can't say that there are no black Edomites. And I'm going to show you very clearly that there are. This is the way that Hasatan is strategizing by holding on to his black players to try and usurp the kingdom again. All right? And so I've talked about that in my The Return of the Scepter video. So you can go and check that out. All right. So let's get into these 4 artificers. Okay? And notice how artificer can mean an artist or a builder or master builder. I just did a Google search for images on artificers and builders, and this is the image that came up. And this is obviously a Masonic type building. I couldn't even find out what it was. It was just a random photo, and you see it's got a tree with 6 branches, and then it's got the pineal pine cone at the top. And so this is clearly Masonic imagery in a Masonic temple. And these are the master builders. These are the architects, the artificers. So these aren't just carpenters. These are those who maketh a lie. Okay? But this is the technical definition. Master builder or master mason is a central figure leading construction projects in pre-modern times and precursor to the modern architect and engineer. So the engineers we know are associated with masons, and architecture is also associated with masons. Okay, so these are the 4 carpenters or artificers. Okay, and prophetically, Esau, Edom took the top branch, took Israel, and planted them in Babylon. So that's what this top pineal gland signifies. All right, so here's one of the key scriptures that helps us to identify some of these 4 carpenters. All right, so this is in the book of Ezra 15:20. Ezra, descendant of Zadok, and Aaron of the tribe of Levi, captive to the Medo-Persia and Artaxerxes. Behold, saith Yahuwah, I will call together all the kings of the earth to reverence me, which are from the rising of the sun, from the south, from the east, and Libanus, to turn themselves one against another and repay the things that they have done to them. The fire is gone forth from his wrath, and has consumed the foundations of the earth, and the sinners like straw that is kindled. Behold, an horrible vision, and the appearance thereof from the east, where the nations of the dragons of Arabia shall come out with many chariots, and the multitude of them shall be carried as the wind upon the earth, that they which hear them shall fear and tremble. Also the Carmanians, raging in wrath, shall go forth as the wild boars of the wood. And from the land of the Assyrians shall the enemy besiege them, and consume some of them. And in their host shall be fear and dread and strife among their kings. Behold, clouds from the east and from the north and unto the south. And they are very horrible to look upon, full of wrath and storm. And they shall go steadfastly unto Babylon and make her afraid. And they shall come unto her and besiege her, and the star and all the wrath shall they pour out upon her. And then shall the dust and smoke go up to the heaven, and they that shall be about her shall bewail her. Okay, so there's a couple of groups we have to look at here, and that is, we're talking about people who are from the rising of the sun, from the south and from the east, and from Libanus, okay? So, Libyan or Lebanon, because we still don't really have the right geography. and the nations of the dragons of Arabia. So we know the Arabians are part of this. People from the so-called East. They always call China the East, but it's not. But there you go. And the Carmanians. Who are the Carmanians? And from the land of the Assyrians. And so let's take a look. So the Medo-Persian kingdom is the second kingdom that is mentioned in the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. And it is mentioned that 4 kingdoms would arise that would rule over and enslave Israel before the coming of Yahusha and their return to their land. And so this is represented in this image of this Babylonian statue where the head is of gold and the chest is of silver. And the Medo-Persian kingdom is represented by the chest because it has, it's got 2 breasts and 2 arms on it, and it's a kingdom that is a mixed kingdom of Japheth and Shem, the Medo-Persian kingdom. So Daniel 2:39 says, "And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee." More detail is given in Daniel 7:5, "And behold another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised itself up upon one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it, and they said thus unto thee, Arise, devour much flesh." In the book of Isaiah, 175 years before it happened, the Medo-Persian kingdom is also mentioned when it says, "Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it." In succeeding verses, the downfall of Babylon is predicted, and Babylon, the glory of the kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, shall be as when Yahuwah overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. So this is a double prophecy, and this is about to happen again. Why? Because what has happened before will happen again. The Assyrian captivity of Israel took place after Babylon, when they overtook Babylon. And that was in around 7 to 800 BC. The Assyrian and Medo-Persian Empire were almost the same empire at one point. That's why the bear holds 3 ribs in its mouth. The Medo-Persian Empire takes Israel captive, and Cyrus plays a particular role, and he's given a special anointing by Yah. And so this is how we begin to tie in the times of the Gentiles beginning. Regarding Esther, in Ezra 6:14 and Nehemiah 2:1 and Daniel 5:3-1, these are all the same person. Cyrus, Artaxerxes, it's just what people from different places in the world called this particular king. And of course, you know who the author of confusion is. So just so you know, so Artaxerxes or Osiris or Darius the Median had a child with Esther, the Hebrew Israelite. She was from the tribe of Benjamin, and that child was called Cyrus, the Persian. And Cyrus is the one, because he's half Hebrew, his mother's Hebrew, he commissions the building of the second temple. Okay? He commissions the building of the second. I really have to apologize for the last study I did. I just rushed through it and it wasn't organized and I just blew it. So I have to go over some stuff with that again. So I'm going to really take my time here so the communication is clear and you guys can enjoy this. So if I'm not making myself clear, this is the prophecy of this second Exodus. The second Exodus. All right? And I want you guys to get ready for it, because at the end we're going to show you how things are lining up with this prophecy of the open door, about how these nations are trying to conspire to fulfill prophecy, and that is to invade the land of Israel and defeat the Babylonian Empire. And so this is all building towards that. So please stay tuned for the end. All right. Remember, everyone started calling themselves Jews during the time of the Medo-Persian Empire, because they went through that whole situation with Esther, and Mordecai, her uncle, where they tried to slaughter all of the Jews. And that was one of the sons of Esau. And so because of that, what happens is that everyone, all the Edomites, start calling themselves Jews at this point in the book of Esther 8:17. And in every province and every city, wheresoever the king's command and decree came, the Jews enjoyed gladness and a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews came upon them. All right, and according to the Jewish Encyclopedia, the Jews admit they incorporated their eternal enemy, the Edomites, into their own religion to become part of their people. All right, they incorporated the eternal enemy, the Edomites, into their own religion to become part of their people. Thus, at this juncture of time, the Edomites were incorporated with the Jewish nation, and their country was called the Greek and Romans Idumea. Okay, this is a Jewish encyclopedia. I'm just showing you that because this is even a time when now Gentiles call themselves Jews, because they're in the Medo-Persian Empire. All right? So this is the beginning of the switch. All right? This is the building of the second temple and the beginning of the switch. So what's so special about Cyrus? What was he commissioned to do? Now, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of Yahuwah by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, Yahuwah stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout his kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying, Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, Yahuwah Elohim of heaven hath given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Yehudah. Who is there among you of all his people? His Elohim be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Yehudah's land, and build the house of Yahuwah Elohim of Yasharel. He is the Elohim which is in Jerusalem. And whosoever remaineth any place where he sojourneth, let the men of his place help him with silver, and with gold, and with goods, and with beasts, beside the freewill offering of the house of Elohim that is in Jerusalem. Ezra 6:14. The elders of the Jews builded, and they prospered through prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo, and they builded and they finished it according to the commandment of Yahuwah of Israel, and according to the commandment of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And the house was finished on the third day of the month. On the third day of the month, Adar, which was in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. And just note with that, Yahusha was raised on the third day. All right? So, and then it says, Thus saith Yahuwah to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him, and I will loose the loins of king, to open before him the 2-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. All right, so Esther, her true Hebrew name is Hadassah, which means renewed covenant. Let's see what the 2-leaved gates are, because remember in the other videos, I have told you that, so you can see in the background here, I don't know if you guys can make it out, but this is a map of Africa, an ancient Chinese map of Africa. And remember I told you up here, this would be the Mediterranean. These are the 2-leaved gates that Judah secured in Jasher when he went to live in Egypt. His father Jacob, Israel, told him to secure those gates. So this is before it was all full of water. But these are the 2-leaved gates that Hiram Abiff has a secret word to open or close, all right, at his command. And so these are the 2-leaved gates leading into the head of the kingdom, and everyone wants to have the head of the earth, the scramble for Africa, right? Thus says Yahuwah to his anointed, whose right hand I have held to subdue nations before him, to open before him the double doors so that the gates will not be shut. I will go before you and make the crooked places straight. I will break into pieces the gates of bronze and cut the bars of iron, and I will give you the treasures of darkness and hidden riches of secret places, that you may know that it is I, Yahuwah, who call you by your name. I am the Elohim of Israel. For Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel my elect, have I called you by your name. I have named you, though you have not known me. So this is a Gentile who does not know him. I am Yahuwah, and there is no other. There is no Elohim besides me. I will gird you, though you have not known me, that they may know from the rising of the sun to its setting that there is none besides me. I am Yahuwah, and there is no other. I form light and create darkness. I make peace and create calamity. I, Yahuwah, do all these things. So when we look at this slide, we see Cyrus, and his name is Koresh or Cyrus, and you see the symbol for the lamp, okay, the kaf, and you see the resh and the shin. So the lamp, the head, and the teeth, the sharp teeth. And so what it means is, possess thou the furnace. In other words, this is the time when the Gentiles possess the light. They take hold of the light. So Israel is a light unto the nations, and now the light is being passed on. Okay, so this is the transition point. That's why I'm starting here. Remember, I told you in the Prester John videos that Esau had a son and named him Kor also, like the priestly line of Levi had a Kor in it. This is why Kor is so often mentioned later by the Babylonians, because what happens is that Esau overtakes that kingdom, and he uses his Kor, Koresh, okay? Remember I said he mimics exactly what Israel does. So he has a Korah, and so now he takes that light. Remember I talked about the meridian of Markor, okay? So this is a king and a priest, all right, in that tradition that they then start taking up. This is in the realm of Medo-Persia, which is right next door to Assyria. And as you know, I don't agree with the current maps. So let's keep going. All right. So one of the things about Cyrus and the role of the Gentiles in these end times is that the role of the Gentiles is to return Israel to the land, to return Israel to the land. What's being proclaimed here is that vessels of silver and gold and offerings, all of these things, he is commissioning to be brought forth like a priest. And what is Israel? Israel is Yah's portion. Yah's, it says, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my offering shall come. Okay, the offering, so the gold, articles of silver and gold. The light will return. Is light, right? So this is the offering. So he built in the natural this physical temple, and he put forth the money to do it, and he commissioned it because he had a good teaching mother who told him to follow these Hebraic ways and rebuild the temple. All right? And so that's what he does. But in these end times, he must now bring the nation, which is the offering and the temple, back to the land. So that's the role of the Gentiles today. Then rose up the chiefs of the fathers of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites, and all of them whose spirit Elohim had raised to go up to build the house of Yahuwah, which is in Jerusalem. And they were all strengthened in their hands with vessels of silver, gold, and goods, with beasts and precious things, beside all that was willingly offered. Also Cyrus the king brought forth the vessels of the house of Yehuda, which Nebuchadnezzar had brought forth out of Jerusalem, and put them in the house of his Elohim. So they were in captivity to a Babylon, and he had to release the treasured people and the vessels, which is the people, back to be put into the temple. Even those did Cyrus the king of Persia bring forth by the hand of Mithridath, the treasurer, and numbered them to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Yehuda. All right? So there we go, the offering. What has happened before will happen again. Now, the Medo-Persians were judged, okay? And I'm going to kind of show you who exactly they are, because they're not the Iranians who are in the land right now, or the Iraqis. Those are all these other 10 nations that have mixed in, the fallen nations that have mixed in with Israel or who have taken over the land. So these are the judgments, right? So Yah went against Damascus with the burden of Damascus, okay? And he said, I will break the bar of Damascus and cut off the inhabitant from the plain of Aven, and him that holdeth the scepter of the house of Eden, and the people of Syria shall go into captivity unto Kerth, saith Yahuwah. So we see the Syrians, the Assyrians, are also, that general area is Medo-Persia and Assyria. It's all kind of the same thing because it's a Shemites' lands. It's the land of Aram, okay, and Elam. And these are all the Shemites. All right. And so the punishment, like I said, in 2014, the burden of Damascus, behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. Now, there are other cities that have been ruinous heaps, but even in that land of Iran, it was taken away in 2014. And then this discusses the fortress of Ephraim shall cease. And the kingdom from Damascus and the remnant of Syria, they shall be of the glory of the children, as the glory of the children of Israel. So these things have happened to them. Damascus is waxed feeble and turned herself to flee. Fear has seized her, anguish and sorrows have taken her as a woman in travail, because Damascus went under punishment, because they did not remember their brotherly covenant as Medo-Persians, as Shemites, okay? And so Yah punished them. And so the people in those regions have been under judgment for the longest time. That's why Iran is always being attacked. And that's why the economies of the people in India and stuff, because that is the land of Shem. So I believe that's Assyria, actually. And I've shown you that before in videos, so we're going to go over it in a second. But they have been under judgment. Remember, Roman Emperor Lucius Septimus Severus, Roman Empire from 193 to 211. After consolidating his rule over the western provinces, he waged another brief, more successful war against the Parthian Empire, the Persian Empire, sacking their capital in 197 and expanding the eastern frontier to the Tigris. All right, and then it says he enlarged and fortified the Limes Arabicus, Arabia, in the area of Petra, and he campaigned in Africa and Mauritania. This is a black Edomite Roman king defeating Persia. This is judgment on Persia. All right. So the Assyrian Empire, I said before in another video that Esau had taken over the Assyrian Empire. He was, I believe, part of that Assyrian captivity, right? Because this says the Hebrew of Akkadian Tukhleth Apesara, meaning my trust is in the son of Isara. Isara being the main temple dedicated to the god Ashur in the city of Ashur, was the king of the Neo-Assyrian Empire from 745 BC to his death in 727 BC. One of the most prominent and historically significant Assyrian kings, and is widely regarded as the famous founder of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Assyrian, Neo-Assyrian. Okay, so Esau became the king of Babylon when he killed Nimrod, and Babylon is Egypt. We always go over that. Mitzrayim, Babylon, Egypt, all the same thing. That is his empire. The Sahara Desert. Remember, Prester John always talked about his desert that was an ocean of desert. Prester John is Sahara. And it says that the Assyrians would be rebuilt and repatriated even before Israel, because Israel did so wickedly. And we see the East Indians in India, Assyria, are coming up now, right? Economically and power-wise, because they were repatriated even before Israel. They've been built back up again before Israel. It's not the people they call the Assyrians. It means there's the descendancy from the fallen angels, a lot of them in there. And there's a lot of other brown people in those lands too. Dragons of Arabia, and also the Carmanians. So when we look at the word karma, I said, hey, karma, what about karma? I looked it up on the map, and it's in India. So like I said, this is the land of Shem, All right, and the Carmanians. It's a place in New Delhi, which is the capital of India. All right, Carmania. All right, so it's spelt differently with a K here. Carmania is a place in the region of Bihar, India. Here are some images of the land, Bam Fortress, etc. Kerman Province. You guys can go ahead and look this up. Got that from Wikipedia. And now we talked about before how in India there was at the edge of it this place on the rock of Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka is just off India because it seems like it broke off in some kind of catastrophe, right? But in Sri Lanka is this cave temples of the lion. Now this could be a dragon or a tiger, or it could be a lion, because there were these images of this lion around as well. And so that could be Lion of Judah. That's also who the Iranians are known to be. They're known to be rams, but it is definitely a Hebrew or Shemitic symbol. And remember in the video about the Hamites, we went into this, that building, there used to be this huge empire up there, this huge structure and kingdom. You can see all this terraced land, and there were all these great waterfalls and everything that were an obstruction to make your way finally up to the kingdom. It was a strategic point for war. It was a huge kingdom, and it's claimed by the East Indians, and of course worshiping their gods. But we find out the architect was Maya Sura. So we know Asura means for Assyrian. And Maya, well, we know the Maya are the Hebrews when they were in the middle land over there between America and Africa, right? And they were called the Maya when Joseph ruled there. They were called the Maya. And so in the Hindu scriptures, they have the Maya Sura. So these are the Assyrians. And so this was a famous architect. So this guy was very likely a Hebrew, and there's a bit more evidence on it. So we see again that it's Assyria, Sumerian, Ashur. So that is Assyria. Okay. Now they geographically show it as being different, but when you look at the words, that the affiliation of this architect was with Asura, and this is in the land of Shem, so it's Assyria. Okay, and of course Esau, this is an image from 1905, Esau ruling in India or Assyria. Here he is, a black man. Look at his servant is a sister with her head wrap on, and look at his black sheiks with him, right? Black Arabs. So let's take a look at the Dalits and specific ethno group among the Medo-Persians. Now keep in mind, I said in the last video that the Brahmins, the Brahmin Putta, were Abrahamites, Shemites. So these are a Shemitic people, just as I demonstrated by some of the geography, okay? But they're also mixed in with the Canaanites, with the Hamites, with the Puttites, Putta, right? And so, but let's just go into some personal struggles that these people generally have with the, I guess what we would call Caucasian Indians, the non-Shemitic people in the land. And I'm not talking about, I guess, the Midianites. I'm talking about perhaps the fallen angel groups, which come from the Caucasian Sea, Caucasian Mountains, Esau, Edom. And here's some images of the people in the land, and you can see how very similar they look to the people on these reliefs of the Medo-Persians. And so this man in this article on the Dalit from 2018, I did this history previously, but I'm just doing a reminder. He looks very, very much like the people on the wall reliefs as the original and true Hebrews of the Medo-Persian captivity, or even the Medo-Persians. But I wanted to draw a video to you about the importance of India, because India and those in it, not all of them, are the real Medo-Persians. They are the dark-skinned people who, at the time of Xerxes, when Esther married the king, These are the people who were changed by the presence of Esther and Mordecai in that land. And so this is the Medo-Persian king that is going to be in part blessed with repatriating Israel, or whom we could consider to be the fourth carpenter. And what is really interesting about some of these people in the land of India, and a lot of them are in both Pakistan and India. Now, Pakistan and India have been divided by the Europeans. But here's an interesting article about a people called the Untouchables, who are also called the Dalit. Now, I told you that the door to Israel is opened through Iran for the true people to come home, and it's called the Dalit, the door. And there's actually a people in India, a persecuted people called the door. So it says, tell everyone we scalped you, how caste still rules in India. Geetabai Jatav and her husband Sardar Singh Jatav sent her at the government hospital in Gwalior. Mr. Sardar, a Dalit, was attacked by an upper caste man. So Mr. Sardar was a Dalit. Okay? So I'll just keep reading. He went for a walk, and a higher caste man named Mr. Sardar greeted him with a punch in the face and broke his arm and pinned him down. And nobody came to his help. And this man stuffed a rag in his mouth, and he pulled out a razor and began to scalp him. And then he says, tell everyone we scalped you. So Mr. Sardar is a Dalit, a class of Indians who are not just considered lower class, but technically outcast. Now remember, the scripture says they have called thee an outcast. Now remember, the scripture says they have called thee an outcast, or what used to be called an untouchable, which is what I suspected all along, was that the untouchables are Hebrews or those who had bowed their head to Yah. This article says that this group is considered so unworthy that they're not even in the caste system. Many Hindus believe that the Dalits are less than human and are spiritually unclean. They were once forced to drink from clay cups that would be destroyed after one use. They have unclean footprints. They're ostracized in Indian society because they are considered unclean, untouchable. And it says here that they have defied social traditions and gone on to achieve great success in society, becoming doctors, writers, politicians, leaders. India even had a Dalit president who was elected president of India in 1997. So they are still considered outcasts by many upper caste people. And the Hindus still look down on them. Now, this Dalit population is estimated to be more than 300 million, and they've been abused as long as anyone can remember. And the violence against them is rising, so I'm wondering if these are Hebrews. And they're often greeted with unchecked brutality. So that's where he was attacked. The crimes are happening across the country, and the Dalits are not simply killed, they are humiliated, tortured, disfigured, destroyed. And then, of course, Avati Ramaya, a sociology professor at Mumbai, says we have a mental illness. You think that India being a world power or global power, sending satellites into space, as long as Hinduism is strong, at the lower caste will be persecuted. So, and they don't have critical numbers to counterattack. And in October, a 14-year-old Dalit girl was beheaded by an upper caste man who said that he hated the girl specifically because of her caste. And then a scavenger was tied up and fatally whipped. Another man was killed for riding a horse, and because a Dalit should not ride a horse. And this is a mention of affirmative active programs. Here they are. This is what the people look like. They look like Hebrews, don't they? Look at the hair. Dalit woman of Dati. So 95% of Indians still marry within their caste. And of course, we know the Brahmin Hindis are originally Caucasians from the Caucasus Mountains. So they are Gentiles. And of course, they worship the Hindu gods. So here is a higher caste Gujar man arguing with the Dalits. Okay? They don't look that much different. But this is the divide and conquer tactic of Europe when they leave behind their colonized states. So it just talks about how they are living under their persecution. The article even compares their circumstance to that of the people in the Jim Crow era in the United States. Mr. Sadar said that while he was being scalped, the Gujars taunted him for wearing a turban, something the Dalits are not supposed to do. And he remembers the men saying, "We're going to take away your crown." Now he has a horrible scar that will remind him for the rest of his life that what the higher caste men did to him. "I wish I were in a different caste," he sighed. I think at the end, he's not going to wish that. So I thought this was really interesting in light of what is going on in these present times, because these are, when we look at the true Medo-Persians, they are very dark people with slightly kinky hair and long hair. These are the original people. It's not, as I said, the Caucasian people, the Turkish who largely inhabit, and other Gentile nations who inhabit much of Iran today. There's a real mix of people there, but it's trodden down by the Gentiles, like most of that region. And what's really interesting here is that this article is what brought it to my attention, because it says, are the Brahmins the Dalits of today? So it talks about how they're starting to be persecuted. But the point of all of this is to say that these people are the Dalit, the door. The people in those regions will help to open the door to the promised land, and are probably closer to the true descendants of the Medo-Persians, who were a dark people with thick, long hair. And look how much this Dalit on the right looks like a brother. And look, notice his hair is kinkier than the man on the left, who is Brahmin Hindi. So the man on the right is the Dalit. So I think he's a Hebrew, but this may be also those among the people of India, Pakistan, Iran, who did become and intermingle with the Hebrews. So around the time that Gandhi, through his protest, won the freedom of, quote, India, basically in 1947, England pulled out and divided India and Pakistan. And of course, this is what the Europeans always do. A nation divided cannot stand, is what Yeshua said. Again, a nation divided cannot stand. So the strategy of the colonizers, of the British of Europe always is to divide a people so they cannot stand. So the partitioning of India was in 1947. And so what they did was they split Pakistan in two and set it on either side of India. So you have India in the middle and East Pakistan on one side and West Pakistan on the other side, close to Iran. And then as far as Kashmir, the princely state, was concerned, they left the people of India and Pakistan to fight over that. Now, the people of India and Pakistan share resources like water and oil and crops, which they export as well in many, many products. But the other way that, of course, the Europeans, the British, divided them was by religion. So there was a migration of the two different groups of religious people across borders in 1947 after this insane divide and conquer division took place. So they made the Muslim area Pakistan, and then they made the Hindi and Sikh area India. And of course, India has a lot of the Brahmin Hindis in power there. So they are the Caucasian people, the people of the Caucasus Mountains. They are not Shemitic people. They are people of Japheth and other kinds of background, seed, fallen seed, or Neanderthal, or whatever. And so the consequence of all of this, of course, rather predictably, was rioting, the New Delhi riot, in which tens of thousands of people were killed or killing each other in rioting. So again, as usual, the Europeans parted people's land. And this is the word of chastisement from Yah to Babylon. You have parted my land, therefore I will part your land. So this is what the West always does. This is what the Iron Kingdom, the woman on the beast, always does, is sets up nations and then leaves them in a state of division. What does Scripture say? A nation divided cannot stand. And so this is always this strategy. There are many, the true Medo-Persian people are the true, as you could say, Shemitic peoples of India. And of course, the Medo-Persian Empire includes Iran, but it also includes India and Pakistan. So let's be very clear that that's how far the Medo-Persian Empire extended. And so Daniel 8, 1 through 2 says, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, and I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. So in Daniel's vision, the prophet sees himself at Shushan Palace in Elam by the river of Ulai. So this is part of the Medo-Persian Empire. The palace of the Medo-Persian Empire was at Shushan. And let's just take a look at Esther to give us a description of it. According to Esther, now it came to pass in the days of Osiris, this is Osiris which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over 127 provinces, that in those days when King Osiris sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, the palace. So we know the palace was in Shushan, and we see here depicted people of Ethiopia and Nubia coming to give tribute to the king Osiris, or the kings in Medo-Persia. As the empire extended all the way through Edom and Arabia and Israel, all the way down into Ethiopia. And so European maps generally do not depict this entire empire correctly. Now, when we go down to Esther 1, verse 9, it says, also Vashti the queen made a feast for the women in the royal house which belonged to the king Osiris. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment to his chamberlains. So the purpose of displaying the name of his queen, Vashti, is because it is a very common East Indian name. It is a very common name among Indian people because of the influence of Hinduism. But it is the queen of Osiris is an East Indian woman. So we know that this empire is in India. And here's another Hebrew group amongst the Indians.
They dance to the beat of the African drum, deep in the forest, mimicking a disappearing species that they've grown to love, the Asiatic lion. They're part of the 20,000 Siddhis, an ethnic group of African descent who live in Gujarat, Western India. Though far removed from their ancestral lands, the Siddhis have cherished their culture. Now it's a source of income for them.
कहीं होटल होता है, पहले हमने 1500 से स्टार्ट किया, तो इसमें से रोज़ का 2-3 सीज़न होता है, तो 6 प्रोग्राम रहता है, तो उसमें 1 आवर का खेल रहता है.
Imran is a Siddhi, a descendant of the Bantu people from southeast Africa. He believes his ancestors originally came from Uganda. Now he lives in a small village called Jambor with his mother and grandmother. The village is surrounded by the forest of Gir, the last bastion of the world's 500 remaining Asiatic lions. Centuries ago, Africans from Ethiopia, Eritrea and Somalia sailed to the Indian subcontinent as merchants, while others were brought as slaves. The Siddhis say they were an elite group of slaves serving the ruling class only. Because of their loyalty and military skills, they were favoured by India's Nawabs or Muslim rulers, and the Mughals, a Muslim imperial power in the early 16th century. The Siddhis rose to positions of power, serving as kings themselves over princely Siddhi states, a little-known fact around the world. Ambassador Saeed Akbaruddin, India's representative to the United Nations, says the Siddhis form an important part of India's history.
These were a very small minority. Look at what they've accomplished for themselves and for Indian society. They rose to be noblemen, they rose to be commanders, soldiers, admirals.
Over time, most integrated fully with the local population, choosing partners of Indian heritage. To preserve their African identity, some isolated themselves, creating small villages in various parts of Gujarat. Curator and historian at the Schoenberg Center in New York, Sylviane Diouf, who's tracked the Siddhi people's journey from the African coast to the Indian subcontinent, explains the roots of the Siddhis currently residing in Gir.
The Siddhi today are the descendants of the 1800s people, as well as some Africans who arrived actually later.
Among them were Imran's ancestors, who were brought to India in the 19th century.
और जो जूनागढ़ का जो नवाब था वो लाया हुआ था, किसी को बॉडी करके ले लाया था, कोई ऐसा कोई जिसे पटरी है, ट्रेन का पटरी, तो उनको उठाने के लिए कोई इंडियन का कोई काम नहीं है कि उठा सके. तो हमारे लोग जो जैसे मजबूत होते हैं, स्ट्रॉन्ग के लिए वो उठाना ज़रूरी है, तो वो लोग भी इसमें भी आए थे, कोई लोग बॉडीगार्ड के लिए आए थे, इसलिए यहाँ पे लाए हुए हैं.
With the passage of time, some escaped slavery, establishing communities in forested areas. But today, life for thousands of cities, such as Imran, is far from glamorous. Most live on the fringes of society, in abject poverty.
कॉलेज जाता है तो कोई जॉब मिल जाता है, फॉरेस्ट में मिल जाता है, आर्मी वगैरह में मिल जाते हैं, तो थोड़े बहुत पैसे हो जाते हैं तो मकान अपने आप कर लेते हैं.
Besides their strength, the cities say that the Nawabs also believed that they held a special relationship with the Asiatic lions and to nature itself.
जैसे हम लोगों को पता रहता है कि लायन कब डेंजर में होता है, उसका हाव कैसा है, वो सब देखना पड़ता है कि जहाँ जहाँ हम लोग हैं वहाँ लायन है ही, मगर उसको क्या है कि हम लोग परेशान नहीं करते कि हम लोगों का जो परिवार है उसको परेशान नहीं करता, घर जैसा माहौल रहता है वो.
Since the 1950s, the Indian government has supported the cities of Gujarat through an affirmative action initiative, recognizing them as a special tribe and granting them individual rights. They've also made it possible for them to draw benefit payments directly out of bank accounts.
They have access to education in a preferential manner. They also have access to jobs in a preferential manner.
But Imran says that accessing this aid is sometimes challenging. And Imran has another concern. Gujarat's Asiatic lion population is threatened by increased overcrowding and competition for space among both animals and humans, and he calls for effective efforts to conserve the species.
पहली बात तो है कि अगर यहाँ से लायन जाता है तो यहाँ के लोकल लोगों को तो तकलीफ पड़ेगी, मगर ये लायन अगर उधर जाएगा तो उसको वो भी मर जाएगा.
The Sidis want to stay here, living with the lions side by side. And when asked about their country of origin, they say, without any hesitation,
फिर भी अपना देश हिंदुस्तान है, तो इधर ही जीना और इधर ही मरना.
Seen the situation in Ukraine, you've seen how the world is responding. Now let me show you how the world is covering this invasion. I'm talking about the media, especially Western channels. How are they covering Russia's invasion? With blatant racism. But they do not see hardships. They only see race, the color of your skin, the color of your hair. Let me show you exhibit number 1. This exchange happened on the BBC, the so-called guardian of unbiased reportage. Listen to how their panel describes the refugees from Ukraine.
It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed.
People with blue eyes and blonde hair. That is why the so-called expert on the BBC is emotional, not because the people are homeless, not because their country is being invaded, but because their hair is blonde. On social media, a lot of people are defending the BBC. They say it's a guest, not their anchor. Let me take you back to September last year. Another guest was speaking on the very same channel, South Asian expert Christine Fair. She called out Pakistan's links with the Taliban. Do you remember what the BBC presenter did? She shut her down. She said it was violating the channel's unbiased coverage. Appalled by the war, not because there is death and destruction, but because it is happening in Europe.
Like Iraq or Afghanistan, this is a relatively civilized, relatively European city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen, or hope that it's going to happen, or hope that it's going to happen.
Let me show you what Bulgaria's Prime Minister said about refugees. I'm quoting. These people are intelligent, they're educated people. This is not the refugee wave we have been used to. People, we were not sure about their identity. People with unclear pasts who could have been even terrorists. That was a European head of state. He is openly calling West Asian refugees terrorists. If this does not expose Western hypocrisy, nothing does. They invaded Asian and African countries. They waged war. They committed war crimes. And when the people fled, they shut their borders. What does this tell you? That refugees were never the problem. That money or borders were not the issue. The issue was race.
What did I tell you guys? This is the land of Shem. How Negro do these West Asian refugees look? Shemites, Medo-Persians, Assyrians. Scramble for the favor of Israel. The news from their website, Yes Baba. The Indians are clearly showing evidence that they've had a long-time military relationship with Putin and Russia, who has provided them with air defense. They're their #1 producer of military weapons, and they've had a long-standing relationship. Currently, their outward-facing PR is saying that India is encouraging Putin to go into peace talks with the Ukraine, but on the hard line, they are military allies. So Jeremiah 51:11 says, "Also the Lord stirred up the spirit of the kings of the Medes because his purpose is against Babylon to destroy her." The Medes will be used by Yah to destroy Babylon. And then the word says, "Make bright the arrows, gather the shields. The Lord hath raised up the spirit of the king of the Medes, for his device is against Babylon to destroy it, because it is the vengeance of the Lord, the vengeance of his temple." That's Jeremiah 51:11 and 51:28. Isaiah 13:17, once again, "Behold, I will stir up the Medes against him, which shall not regard silver. As for gold, they shall not delight in it." They're not going to take anything but revenge. So I want to go into a little bit of the setup for 2018 for India setting up to become a superpower and America sort of disregarding it. And this very Indian leader being set up and voted for at this time.
It seems like Great Britain is in the news every single day, right? While comparatively, India is hardly in the news at all. And of course, Brexit's interminable coverage, some of which you do see here. But did you know that India is about to surpass the Brits? They're about to surpass them economically. Most people don't know this. As the 5th largest economy in the entire world, they also have nukes that are pointed at Pakistan. So, India matters. Here's the thing. They rarely get much news coverage. Tonight we focus our attention on India. Why? 900 million people went to the polls to re-elect Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who is a Hindu nationalist, by the way. And remember that. So what does this mean for the direction of the country? How does this affect us? And more importantly, perhaps, the conflictive relations that India continues to have with Pakistan. Jay Kanzara is one of the directors of the Hindu American Foundation, and he's good enough to join us now live to bring us up to date on this topic. Hey, Jay, given who this guy is, this president who was reelected, and he seems to be, if I can use this term, correct me if it's wrong, a Hindu hawk, should we be more concerned about what he might do regarding Pakistan?
So thank you, Rick, for having me on this evening. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is first and foremost a democratically elected leader who was just given a huge mandate by the people of India over 300 seats in India's parliament, which is well over the majority number of seats needed to win on his own mandate. And that is significant for the United States, especially because he has been a key partner, India has been a key partner in the war on terror, and ensuring that America's security interests are maintained in the region. India is right there helping the United States in Afghanistan. They've rebuilt the parliament there. They've also helped with training police officers. They've also been working hand in hand with American security agencies and intelligence agencies to provide critical information needed to ensure that America's security interests are played out in the region.
So that partnership is solid. I want to come at you from a different direction now. I want to talk about the lack of coverage that India gets. Maybe even the word respect might be appropriate here. And I was starting to read to coverage that India gets. Maybe even the word respect. I want to talk about the lack of coverage that India gets. Maybe even the word respect might be appropriate here. And I was starting to read today about India, and I was really taken aback by the direction of the economy of this country in the future. If it continues the way it's going, it's not just going to pass Great Britain, it's going to pass a whole bunch of countries. What's going on?
Including America. It's expected to be a larger economy than the United States, even. I mean, when you have 1.3 billion people, when you have an economy that's having, sustained growth of 6 to 7% a year, and when you are ensuring a free and fair market system, or trying to engender that amongst in India, and the Sensex, by the way, and the Nifty 50, as it's called, which are, the stock exchanges in India, went through the roof when Narendra Modi's election was announced, that his party was overwhelmingly the majority in Parliament. And so therefore, this is a key relationship that the United States, if I may be so blunt in saying, it is the most important relationship that the United States is going to have in this century. It is the only...
Do you agree when I made? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I thought you were done. But do you agree when I made the point that here, every royal baby is covered, everything that happens in Britain is covered, and yet, we barely hear a peep about India.
And unfortunately, what is often portrayed about India is extremely stereotypical. It is xenophobic, and it is, and as you said before, it does not garner the respect that a country of 1.3 billion people that is peaceful, that is a leader in the region deserves. And I think the Indian American community, of which it's 3+ million strong, are changing that perception as well, because they are, and the diaspora across countries, UK, Singapore, Great Britain, Australia, Africa, etc. The Indians that have lived in these countries outside of India are overwhelmingly supportive of the re-election of Narendra Modi, because they want to see development in India.
I'm going to go back. We have 30 seconds because you kind of brushed aside my first question a little bit, so I'm going to throw it back at you.
Sure.
I'm still a little worried about your relations with Pakistan. And by you, obviously, I'm not referring to you, but I mean India's relation with Pakistan. What would you say on that issue?
Well, I noticed that Prime Minister Imran Khan did tweet at Narendra Modi this afternoon, in which he said that he wants to work towards peace and prosperity in the region. And I think the Prime Minister of India has nothing but those intentions. And Pakistan has to reign in terror. They recently perpetrated a terror attack from their territory in Kashmir, the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir, and this was simply unacceptable by the international community. I think the international community is standing with India on combating terror, including Gulf countries such as the UAE and even Saudi Arabia.
And then, as you've heard in this video from RT, the Indians have very much sided with the Americans. They've got a larger Brahmin caste, Caucasian caste, and they have been supporting Iraq, and they are standing against, quote, terrorism, and they are calling the Pakistanis terrorists. And so when the scripture talks about these wars and battles that will take place, at first, the Medo-Persians are part of Yah's vengeance against Babylon. And then, when Babylon comes to attack, they side with her. So this could be the split between the Pakistanis, or the true people, including the Dalit people, the untouchables, versus the Brahmins, who are now beginning to consider themselves a minority and realizing the fall of the Gentile powers in their community. So what may happen is that the people who are of Islam or of Iran or of the untouchables within Pakistan and so forth may, because they are being pushed away by the Americans, may choose to go over and side with Iraq in order to break open that door, right? And then the people of India will side with America. And but then eventually, when Russia comes back a second time to a people in unwalled villages and unsuspecting people in unwalled villages, and goes in a second time to take a spoil, then it says at that time that the Medo-Persians will be on their side also. So that may be a time when India has actually sided with them. So I guess we'll just have to see what happened. But anyway, I wanted to put that in as a note. These guys are part of the four carpenters, the people of India and Pakistan, the true Medo-Persians. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. Baruch atah. Shalom. Please like, subscribe, and share. Like, subscribe, and share. I encourage you to make a donation at livelightwell.com into alltruth.net, and in order to obtain a calendar, the Moed appointed times, and Chaya Eat Life and Fast. They enable us to live our lives Hebraically, to line up with the appointments or meetings with our Creator, who pours a message and a word into us and guides us into all truth. And it's by using these types of tools that we can remain faithful to our Elohim's word and enter into the promise. Okay, so it's not just a cookbook, Chaya Eat Life and Fast. It's about a Hebraic lifestyle, fasting, and the divine procession of life and order, and the Hebraic foods and healing, okay, from a Hebraic perspective. And so it helps you to line up with Yah's commands. Subah Yahuwah, Rev Olav Yasharel. Return, O Yah, to the countless thousands of Israel.
Israel, who love, worship, and praise Yahweh. Give him thanks by saying hallelujah.